that the address be agreed to. And before I call the honourable member for Goldstein, and whilst this is his first speech of this term of parliament, I welcome him back to the chamber, and I know all members will be courteous to him. And I give the call to the honourable member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Speaker. Take two. Honouring the trust afforded as the first to have retaken the same seat lost to an independent, the second chance given, a third term granted, and voters stepping forth to buck history. I give thanks by living out the commitment given nearly a decade ago, that the people of Goldstein know their community is not an inheritance or a seat to be warmed. It is a trust to be earned in your service. And since last standing 2 sword lengths away in this chamber, I've lived a political winter. There are times when only the words of Kipling fit. Force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you, except the will which says to them, hold on. None of us wish to live a winter through sickness, family or relationship breakdown, financial loss or public humiliation. But when these moments present themselves, our choice is only how we respond. To that end, in my first speech to the House, I uttered words that would stalk me. We know people sometimes fall down. That is why we respect the speed at which they seek to pick themselves up. And when my winter came, it was family, friends, community and professional support that cushioned, that humbled, nurtured and changed me. But we must also never forget that winter is followed by the hope of spring, because we are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking up at the stars. I am not the first nor the last member to have run and won, lost and then lived. He's mad, he's stark-raving bonkers, but I'll let you in on a little secret. All the best people are enough to return to this place. Perhaps I am the most appreciative. So uniquely, I am going to thank the people of Goldstein for their decision 3 years ago. And it is for one simple reason. It was an opportunity for growth. Now, before we go further, I'm quite happy for it to be a oncer. But as my husband said on the Sunday morning after, you need to look at this as a gift. And so when announcing I was recontesting, I started by saying defeat was a gift, in thanks to the community. And I meant it. And today I confirm it and thank the former member Zoe Daniel for her service too. I recently said I'm in the truth bomb phase of my career. For years our movement has been sold a pup, that voters can be neatly sliced into electoral majority by design. After the marriage law postal survey, the miracle victory and the voice referendum, we were told electoral riches lay in new heartlands and we should abandon tradition. If you still believe this story, as the only Liberal MP for a city seat and one of 2 in inner metro Australia, I have some magic beans I can sell you. Because I used to joke that Goldstein was a Liberal political island, except about 1 kilometre of a shared border with the electorate of Higgins. I'd now love that 1 kilometre. I now have to drive 50 kilometres to reach another Liberal electorate. It's simple. You can't multiply your vote by dividing Australians. It betrays Menzian liberalism because liberalism has no geography. Liberalism is the spark of aspiration that compels a young farmhand to milk cows before suns rise so they can save to own their own dairy farm one day. It's the fuel of a young tradie caffeinated to clock on at 7 so they can surf by 4. It's the sobriety of a new Australian nurse late after sunset so they can own a one-bedder and not face renting in retirement. It's the ambition of 2 young mates hawking a slice of their start-up to venture capital in the hope one day it will list. It's the risk of a CEO reinvesting to navigate competition because they understand change is the only certainty. It's the drive of a mum working in legal while working from home on Fridays so they can have independence and career. And it's the energy of her husband and his small business that sponsors the local netball team because his success is tied to a thriving community. And it's the teachers, like my husband Ryan, who are inspiring a new generation to open their eyes to a better Australia and future every day. It is the story of millions in Goldstein and elsewhere who wake up each morning choosing to take responsibility so that tomorrow will be better for themselves and for others too. They don't want us to solve their problems, but they are counting on us to defend their agency. And at the last election, we let them down because we were not the bold and courageous Liberals that gave Australians confidence to dare for a better future. Speaker, having lived my winter, it is clear my party is now facing its own. In grief, it is easy to seek out simple solutions when reflection is necessary. 3 years ago, I read Doris Kearns Goodwin's Leadership in Turbulent Times. And yes, a young Teddy Roosevelt's wilderness years held lessons for building the foundations for future success. It started a journey that allowed me to be honest enough that whatever the driver of our local defeat, there were still things that I needed to learn. And it started with listening, and it concluded with building. There were the usual noisy voices on broadcast platforms about what to stand for, but the true genius of Menzies was that he understood and started by standing for the forgotten people, and from there, what he stood for followed. I found the real kernels were in the quiet conversations in pubs, Pilates classes, church halls, and on the sidelines of Saturday sports. And this was embodied in every part of our local campaign. And what I am most proud of is that our Goldstein team did this together. Because as the community-backed Liberal, we built a movement of 3,500 people that went from local cafes to our oversubscribed 800-strong campaign launch to energise a community and defy political gravity. And many are in the gallery today. The victory in Goldstein is theirs. The azure blue T-shirted volunteers armed with hearty smiles and passion carried me here. They have shown that the path back is not one our parliamentary team can take alone. It relies on rebuilding our movement in Goldstein, Wentworth, Mackellar, Menzies, Aston, Lyons, Dixon, Brisbane, Boothby, Curtin and right across the electorates of this country. The parliamentary party's job is to lead, and our people will follow if we fight for them, when we give them something to fight for, and when we are worthy of them fighting for us because we spirit them to a higher purpose of common destiny. To thrive once again, we need to see this moment as our gift, because it will mean we have reconnected and given Australians Liberal hope again. Speaker, I did not grow up with a silver spoon, nor under a weatherboard and iron. I grew up with a household of publicans and small business people. For my father, it was pulling beers, pushing a lawnmower, building fences and bagging the post. For my mother, it was also pulling beers, cooking at a fryer and greeting at supermarkets. They lived different lives, but the one lesson they shared was work. And this was the simple faith my siblings and I gained, that if you worked hard, respected your neighbour, played by the rules, loved this country, you'd be rewarded with dignity, opportunity and the chance to live a better life. The Australian promise was a social contract, that there was no entitlement, but of a fair go. It didn't mean choppy waters didn't come, but that hope and aspiration should guide your decision-making, that the circumstances of your birth should not define the boundaries of your life. It was embodied in the ideals that Menzies described of his modern Liberal movement, that it was not the, quote, conservative dying party of dying on the last barricade, but of a lively mind and a forward-looking heart. It believed in free people, their responsibility and their enterprise, respecting tradition and institutions that empower people, families and communities and small business to decide their own futures, that is an agent for progress because human advancement depends on rising living standards and stewards a clean environment to hand to future generations. And this was the promise of Goldstein. As the fourth generation of my family that has lived and worked within the community, it has always lived these values and been a forward-looking, modern, liberal community that has understood its responsibility to each other. Goldstein does not want Canberra to run it, but it does not expect Canberra to undermine it either, such as stripping out $100 million from local infrastructure projects as occurred over the past 3 years. It also does not want to live the failure of Canberra's leadership from the threats of local crime, the rise of anti-Semitism, financial stress for families and small business, and limited access to affordable housing. Goldstein expects leadership. It believes in our country and wills its success. And this is why I continue to want to represent Goldstein and give its values voice in this parliament, because when Goldstein's values influence Australia, we are a better nation. Speaker, it is these values that are increasingly under threat. There is an undercurrent in our democracy where too many voters no longer trust the system is working for them. I hear this from Australians at all stages of life. I hear young adults questioning the value of their tertiary education and whether they'll ever be able to get ahead of their debt, whether young workers can afford rent, let alone save a deposit, and then pay off a mortgage and then have a family, whether they have the confidence to chance their hand to start a business or the space in their lives to invest in their community, and whether they stare down their retirement years with confidence. It is the threat of the slow erosion of trust in our institutions, our leadership, and even in each other. Now, I don't wear my faith in my sleeve, but the good book's insight that a house divided against itself cannot stand is truer today than ever. Because I utterly reject the politics that infected too many from the extremities of all sides of the political spectrum and the corporate-funded independents, who all share a different vision anchored in the same idea, that we must stand for some but not for all. Our party's founder called these attempts to pit Australians against each other the false wars. We are all Australians, and nothing is more corrosive to the Australian promise than people no longer believing sacrifice and effort will get them ahead. It is why the unapologetic pursuit of the next chapter of our nation's economic growth remains paramount, because too many of those we need to create it are moving offshore, and the only voices we hear feed resentment over how to carve up shares of a diminishing pie. It is particularly important for us. If we are to be the party of aspiration, we must always be on the side of the aspiring, which is always the next generation and new Australians, not entrenched interests. These are Goldstein's values, and I know these are the values of our party's leader, and I thank her and appreciate her support today. Speaker, power is like the breath that sustains the nation's lungs. When at threat, the central organs breathe in power from the people to protect the whole. And for 30 years, Australia has enjoyed a long exhale. But the internationalist era, with the confidence that nations would peacefully trade for the future advancement of humanity, has sunsetted. History has struck back. We are experiencing the culmination of relaxed and comfortable leadership, and as Liberals we must have the courage to tell uncomfortable truths today about what we know is on the horizon. If not, Australians will have no reason to trust us on how to confront them as they are revealed. And we are at an inflection point in our nation's history that demands controlled breathing to confront the future with confidence. The nation is but the sum of its people, and we must always be mindful to nourish the soil of our society from which future generations draw their strength. Nourishment does not come from fostering the division of identity, but investing in our common bonds, knitting the social fabric of family and community, finding our cultural confidence and promoting excellence in education once more. It comes from agreement on a shared common story for our nation, because we cannot expect new Australians to integrate into a story that we cannot tell, and from a belief in Australia and its progress, because we can tell a story of Australia that recognises, respects and has reconciled and takes the best of our past to define our future. We can defend our national unity and stridently stand against the poisons of racism, whatever its extremist origins, and particularly the gateway of socialised anti-Semitism. We must again be the democratic defenders of our values and the equal dignity of free people, and we must grasp Menzies' great vision of home's material, home's human and home's spiritual, that places home ownership at the centre of public policy. Because when we do, the nucleus of social, economic and political power rebalances from the corridors of this place and Canberra and corporates and back to the kitchen tables of this nation. And while no one has a right to the size of a home or a specific suburb, we cannot strengthen families when involuntary distance divides generations and their mutual support. We must stand for fiscal prudence, because borrowing from the future fuels inflation today, taxes tomorrow and indebts those that follow. And when residents living with Down syndrome are raising concerns about the NDIS's fiscal trajectory just after 7 a.m. at McKinnon Railway Station, it says the anxiety is not just economic. And we must live limited government, because it is a simple truth that big government makes us small citizens, and no society has ever been better because people have been encouraged to take less responsibility. We must be trusted and reliable partners and defenders of our alliances, because a world without strong friends is a world where we risk standing defenceless and alone, and we must be advocates for the reindustrialisation of Australia and its farm's future, and an energy mix based on physics and economics, because the foundation of our economy is dug and grown. Because right now the source of our next chapter of growth seems utterly foreign, and we are unprepared for the end of the frothy prices of our mineral resources and the realities of artificial intelligence that could displace unemployment, let alone the flexibility of a workforce that will increasingly be a mix of salaries, side hustles and shared equity. Indeed, our biggest challenge is not capital, but an abundance of complacency in a time that demands urgency. Speaker, we are now at a pivotal moment for our party, our values and our nation. For our party, a coalition and a movement, where we are now at our lowest ebb since the Albury rebuild 8 decades ago. For our values, the vote harvesters are hoping we let the social democratic conformity march unchallenged, so the only story sold is the false promise to hand over power for security. And for our nation, it is a choice about the type of people we want to be and whether we carry our inheritance of freedom, prosperity, hope and opportunity forward for a new generation, or sit idly by and watch its decline. On every flank we are outnumbered. The armies of vested interests have never been stronger, better resourced and ready to finish us off. Organised labour seeking to suck the remaining initiative out of private enterprise. Organised capital leveraging their power to bend corporate bureaucrats to their will. Foreign globalists propping up front groups and corporate candidates who want to deindustrialise Australia for their profit. We are at a Menzian moment, and the gift of defeat is the opportunity of liberal revival. We are all that is left to stand up for the public and national interest, and if we do not, no one will. The gravitational pull could not be stronger, the call to liberal courage could not be heavier, the stakes could not be greater. If Australians do not share our liberal call to action, it is not their failing, it is ours. But we must find that spark and spirit it, nurture it and feed it into a flame. As Harvey Milk once said, the only thing they have to look forward to is hope, because liberalism does not live in the words we say, but in the aspirations Australians live. because liberalism lives when Australians set their sights one angle higher and with a range one step farther to the horizon. The Australian Liberal project is built from a spiritual belief in our shared success and calls people to not just vote for ourselves today, but us tomorrow, because hope is inevitably tempered by the weight of history. But take it from me, history is there to be made. To quote one of my heroes, it can be done. It can be done because it has been done, because it must be done. At our local campaign launch, I said Goldstein was ground zero for the fight for our future. Goldstein found its voice, and the people of Goldstein sent me here to lead, to build, to mobilise and to storm. And our choice now is clear. Will we be the Liberals that honour generations past by handing a better future than our own? Will we be the Liberals that inspire Australians to turn to each other and see a shared destiny? Will we be the Liberals that strengthen our nation to be sovereign, confident and secure? Will we be the Liberals that build a clean industrial future so prosperity is on our horizon? And will we be the Liberals that side with the young and new Australians who live our daily aspiration? And will we be the Liberals that turn on the lights in a nation for all of us that delivers hope, reward and opportunity? To be bold again, to build again, to believe again and to lead again. Speaker, as I said to the people of Goldstein, I'm not quite done yet. There's a fair number of people I need to thank. First, I need to thank my campaign team, led by my campaign directors, Ed Davis and Rob Sayer. I still remember the first campaign meeting where we held and mapped out the scale of the plan and what was required. There was a nervousness about the scale of the task, but you both stepped up with Stav Pasonis, Conan Daly, David Morris, Jake Scarbossa, James Loveluck, Roy Rose, Millie Edwards, James O'Collins and Andrew Gourlay, as well as our regional champions Richard Codron, Judith Aronovich, Robert Telling, Jennifer O'Brien and John Gilbert, as well as Deb Gilbert and Peaches the Pug, supported by Ben Tianlin, Jake Lowry and Billy Allsop. And to the Goldstein electorate team, including Carson Mumford, Olivia Brooks, Shane Small, Lisa Bond, Hannaford Bushby and Gab Strip. But there is no one I should thank more than my electorate chair, Marie Kidd, who not only willed me to recontest, but put her money where her mouth is and stepped up to take on the task of chair the membership and mobilisation effort. There are too many volunteers to name, and without taking anything away from anyone, I particularly want to thank Michael Saba and Robin Saba, Janet Aberdee, Karen Cohen, Helen Rolfe, Linda Mellon, Peter Harisidanis, Tanya Tesha, Janice Cook, Judith Pratt, Fraser Hurst, Tony Armstrong, Galen Sullivan, Maddie Hamilton, Ken Marshall, Suzanne Rumble and Jen Colombo, and to those who helped in their unique ways from Peter Cantwell and Katia Gidley, Brad Johansson and Jorah Goring, Jacqueline Pascal, Danny Rudbury and Faye Barrow, and to Professor Chris Berg and Professor Sinclair Davidson for their support, as well as Will Dempsey and Paul Ritchie, who ensured I never put a word wrong. On such occasions, the memory of absent friends is also not far. 9 years ago, Jeanette Rawlinson and John Rudden couldn't have foretold the events to come, but their support was important because they supported me regardless of the test yet to be revealed. And thank you also to Mike and Anne for their love. I hope I've made you proud. To the friends who stuck by me in difficult times, to Blake Kempthorne and Michael McMara, Claire Tobin and Hugh Turbin, Phil Starkins, Emma Duffy and Ryan Lewis, Adrian Barrett and Pat Miller, Jane Starkins, Sean Levin and Kathy Baker, Susan Kaur, Jared Parks, Marty Barr and Jimmy Roach, and Henry Gower-Tillett and John Gower-Tillett. Also to Pete and Gaunt and Kevin Foster and their son Will and their son and my godson Patrick. Thank you for your enduring friendship and love, and most importantly, thank you for taking care of Ryan. To the member for Moncrieff, thank you for your friendship in the out years, and particularly for storing all my stuff in this place. To Senator Andrew Bragg. Braggy, during my interregnum, whenever I got the itch and abstention to probe public servants, call out recalcitrant super funds or the corruption of corporate housing, you were there to channel my spirit. So thank you. To Senator James Paterson and Jane Hume, thank you for both being supporters during the down days. And while I suspect you both had your private doubts, and that's fine, by the way, you never let it show. To the member for Monash and Barara, you both don't know this, but when I spoke to you to congratulate you both on your pre-selection, 7 years apart, you had the kindness to respond with exactly the same set of words. And you're sitting right in front of each other. I hope to share this journey with you. I didn't lose in 2022 just so you could both have this experience. However, I am glad to fulfil your wishes. Specifically to you, Mary, this is such a huge day for you. We have come a long way from level 2 of S Block at Monash Caulfield together. I know your family is proud of your achievements. And as your political family, as Ryan and I are, we're cheering you on. And I've got a warning for everybody else. Get ready, it's Mary time. To the Leader of the Opposition, Susan Lee, thank you for being a willing supporter. And I still remember when you came to the Hampton Bowls Club shortly after the 2022 election and you're surprised that defeat wasn't in my eyes. I think some of the members opposite are starting to realise that it doesn't matter what they do, that's not going to change. I am sanguine about our moment, but I am excited about your promise. To my dear friends Trevor Evans and Jason Falinsky, and I know Jason's eventually found his way to the right spot in the gallery today. We all remember the Monday week after the last election where we sat in my former office amongst boxed memories. We toasted what could have been our last shared GNT. Since then, we shared a different journey. There were days I was touched. You trusted me to carry your grief in the rant down a phone line, a joke on WhatsApp, or an education on woodpeckers. That's specific to Trev. Yes, woodpeckers. You'll never appreciate what it meant to me to be able to pick up the phone and talk through stories, strategy, sadness, but mostly it was Trev talking Jason off the ledge, but that's same old, same old. But thank you for your friendship. To my mother Linda Morris, who stood on Hampton early voting for 2 weeks straight. And I know she did it because so many people said to me in the community, I bet your mum. And they still do, including Raph Epstein. And David Morris, who capably aided the campaign team every step of the way and continues to do so. And to my father Robert and Janet Wilson, who wished us well and helped in their way from afar. Thank you. But of course, there is no one I need to thank more than my husband Ryan. Every time you walk into this chamber, you end up leading the news. Sorry about that. We were the change that needed to be at a time in times past. And that is the greatest gift that anybody could ever give. Now, I know you have been prepared to give us over again to the community and to the nation, somewhat willingly. So all I can do is promise that I'll do everything I can to protect our summers on the peninsula, keeping our Melbourne and Bayside pads clean, making time for roast pub lunches on Sundays, and when there is something to celebrate, I'll do my level best to make sure that we do it together. Because in public life, you never feel as lonely as in defeat. Yet despite having lived it, in the 17 years we have been together, I have never been alone. So thank you for your sacrifice once more and for sacrificing our time for our country's future. But you also know that to be myself, we need to go through this. What's all the laughing about? There will be another day. It'll come. I love you and I'm blessed to have you in my life. And the nation is blessed for the tolerance and love you give me to serve. Thank you, Speaker.